Hi, it's Bobbie from Fifth Avenue Cakes, and today we're going to make Marie Antoinette sugar cookies. So let's begin. Alright, so right now we have a cookie that has already been baked, and we're going to do some top coating. But I wanted to show you my Marie Antoinette cookie cutter. What I ended up doing, because I could not find any Marie Antoinette cutters on the market, is I did a diagram of what I wanted my cookie to look like, and then I sent it to a place who makes custom cookie cutters. So if you're interested in the cookie cutter, just get a hold of me, and we will be selling it. So that's the cookie cutter. It's also great for making wedding brides. Alright, so I have my diagram, and I'm just going to make a little bit of an outline on, and it's not completely perfect, so I'm going to be scooting it around, but I just want to know where some stuff is. So I'm going to take my pencil and go over my lines just enough so that I know about where my face is going to go. And actually my face is going to end up being a little bit bigger than that. After testing one, I realized I needed it to be a little bit bigger. So, and actually, we're going the wrong way. Okay. Going backwards, but it's not going to matter for that part. And I'm just going to draw in where her neckline is. Some of the important pieces that I don't necessarily want to just eyeball it with the royal icing. And I don't want her hand to be on the dress. That was just a little bit more complicated, so I'm just going to sketch in where I want a hand. And I'm going to flip this over, because I found that worked out really well. And her other hand is going to be right about there. So we're just kind of making a little bit of sketch marks of where some things are going to be. And a little bit of graphite is fine. It won't hurt you. People are always asking me, is it okay to eat a cookie that's been marked with graphite? And it is. If you make a mistake, take a little bit of Everclear and a paper towel. So, just going to bring this up just a tad. And remember, this is just a rough sketch. I'm not all that concerned about how I want. Each of my cookies are a little bit different. They're a little bit different of a design. And I just want to know where her little cap is going to be, so I know where her hairline will start. Okay. Now when I did my cookies, I was doing quite a few of them at one time, so I did each part as an assembly line. Since we're just doing one cookie, it's a little bit different because you need to let parts dry before you can go on to the other parts. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to bring in her neckline, because I want her chin to go over her neck, of course. So I'm going to put the neck right about here because the chin's going to come in over the neckline. And her hair is going to be coming down onto her neck and her dress. So we're just going to put in this neck. We're going to fill it in. This is about 15 consistency top coating icing. And then I'm going to move on to parts of the dress, and we'll come back and do her face. We're going to do a little bit of like sculpting with the royal icing, and I'll show you what that means. So I just want to get that neck in. This is a pretty small area that we're working with. So the next thing I'm going to do is with light pink and a number 3 consistency. I'm going to go ahead and put in the top part of her dress. And again, I'm still working with top coating consistency. Right now, everything is top coating consistency. So I'm going to bring this down to the bodice of the dress. I am not too concerned about being totally perfect because I'm going to be going over this with a lot of piping and frills, as you saw. So if you make a mistake, don't worry about it too much. It's not going to matter. And I'll show you when we get to that part. I'm going to let that set for a minute, and I'm going to go ahead with a number 2 and top coating consistency. I'm going to put in her headpiece, keeping in mind that her hairline is going to have a little bit of movement going on. So we're just going to bring in that headpiece. And as long as I've got the gray, I'm going to do her shoe after I get this in. The most tedious part of this cookie is going to be her face. So I'm going to go down here and you can see that she's got a little bit of a shoe going on. So I'm going to come in at a little triangle of an angle. So, and I bring in the dark pink part of the dress. It'll just lay on top of that. Okay, so now we're going to bring in her arms for the dress. I'm just taking a peek over here at the cookie that I did. So here about where the sleeve of her dress, not her arms, I'm sorry, the sleeve of her dress is going to go. And the reason I wanted that pink to have a little bit of the lighter pink to have a little bit of time to sit is I didn't want it to turn into a wet on wet and to marry with one another. Even though I'm going to put a ruffle up there, this way if you choose to leave it a little bit plain, you can without any problems. And then we'll put in another sleeve on this side. And how much you want to give yourself for a guide is completely up to you. If you want to draw the whole thing in, that's fine. If you're uncomfortable using the graphite, you can go ahead and use an edible marker. Those will work just as well. I'm going to let that sit because I do need to bring in this part of the dress. So I'm going to go back to the face and I'm going to show you what we're going to do there. I forgot to grab my eyeballs. So I wanted it to look like, since it was such a small face, I did not want to be dealing with painting too much on the eyes. So I made some bead consistency icing that I'm going to put in right about here. So let me just squeeze out just a little bit. And I'll put those on with a tweezer so I can get a little bit more exact. And that way it'll look like the icing is coming over her eyes. Like I said, the face is going to be a little bit bigger than what I drew out. So I'm going to bring in her face. I'm going to outline it first with my top coating consistency. And the biggest part you want to remember here is that the chin needs to come over the neck. And that's why we let that sit a little bit, so that it wouldn't look like it was all one piece. That it looked like she really did have a chin. You can make the face any shape you want. Now this is going to take the longest to do because you're going to be maneuvering things around, like with the eyes. Like every time I do this, I find I didn't make the face big enough. And what I found by accident was, depending on how long you can let your icing dry out for without getting those marks, you can sculpt a little bit of a nose and a mouth in so that you don't have to worry about that. The other thing you want to do is, with a very lightly dampened brush, is keep going over those eyes. You want those eyeballs to show, and you want it to look like the skin is coming, like you have eyelids. And the icing's going to want to fight with you a little bit here, so just keep wiping down your eyeball. And this part takes, like I said, the longest. So I'm going to bring her chin out a little bit more, and then I'm going to go back up by those eyes. And I'm deliberately letting this get a little bit dry so that I can do what, to me, represents sculpting. And what you're going to want to do is just keep pushing up in that nose area and in the mouth area. And the more you push out from the eyes, the more you're going to develop some cheeks with the icing. So you want to work fast enough that you don't start getting marks, because this is the one place you're not going to be going over with decorative piping. You'll be putting a little bit of her hair on the side of her face, but you definitely want this face to be as smooth as possible. So by working with a damp brush, and I don't know how well you can see those little eyeballs in there, but when I bring in the top coated cookie that we're going to decorate, you'll be able to see it. And make sure when you're working with that damp brush, this is the one eyeball, I'm having a little bit of difficulty getting it, the icing to move. You don't want it to be too damp, because the idea isn't to get your icing wet. The scriber works okay. The problem is that you don't want to scrape that eyeball and move them out of the way like I just did. So the brush is a little bit softer and a little more gentle. And if you want, you can attach the eyeballs a couple hours ahead of time and then go back. And do your top coating of your cookie. But just work it. And the reason I'm showing you this in real time is I want you to see how long I can actually work this icing, how long it will actually let me do this before it starts getting angry. And you can see that I'm making a little mark where the nose is. Because the face is so small, that's all I need is a tiny little mark. I want it to represent a nose. You don't want to go too crazy with trying to make it look as real as you can, because you'll over decorate it. So now we'll go in, and this should be dry enough that we can put in the sides. Actually, I'm going to put in the arms. So for the arms, we're going to do a little bit of pressure piping. What you're going to want to do is think about an arm and where the elbow is. So we're going to want it to be a little bit thicker here. And then a little bit thinner down here. And then I'm just going to pull out what represents a thumb and a fourth finger. I don't want to go too crazy again with the hands. I just want to represent that I have a hand there. You want your thumb, of course, to be smaller than your finger. And then the same thing on the other side. Don't worry too much about what the arm looks like as far as being attached up to that dress, because like I said, that's where we're going to be frilling, so we're not going to worry about that. But you do want to make sure that the top part of the arm is thinner than the bottom part of the arm, or is thicker than the bottom part of the arm. And that your hand is a little bit fat at the bottom, so that, or you have a little bit of a bead so that you can pull out her fingers. And there you go. So I'm going to go ahead, since this is still pretty wet, and put in this little part, which is the inside of her dress. So we're going to go ahead and top coat this whole area here. And this is just regular top coating, just like you would do anything else. I found that if I went with almost 12 consistency for the face and the neck, it gave me just a little bit longer, but it does make it a little bit more difficult to work with, because you don't want it to run on your cookie, and that's why I use such a small tip. You could even go down to a 0, or of course you could use a parchment or a plastic bag that doesn't even have a tip in it. It should be fine. Now this cookie will need 2 days, so give yourself 2 days. You want a day for the top coat to completely dry, and then the second day you'll be decorating your cookie. And then from here, we'll put on the sides of the cookie. And the hair I add on later when we decorate, so I'll show you how to do that. Now, like I said, when I was doing a lot of these, I would do the face, so I would do like 5 cookies and 5 faces, and then I'd go to the, or necks, and then I'd go to the dress, and then I'd come back and forth. But because we're dealing with just one cookie, we do have to give it a little bit of time. So I'm just going to move this out of the way while I'm trying to get that to dry. The important part about the face is that you definitely see a chin, a detail in the chin. So now we'll add in the dress. And all I did for my colors, and you can go with whatever color you choose to go with, was I did, and I went a little bit darker so that you could see the pink than I did for my the actual cookies that I showed you. I want it to look like her thumb's laying on the dress. But all I did was I went with about a quarter of a toothpick of pink for the dark, and then for the light I just brought it down, I would say almost to white, about 4 shades lighter, so I'd have definition in there. The other thing to remember if you're going to be working on an assembly line of cookies is that you don't want to run out of color, because it'll be really hard for you to get that color to look exactly the same again. So if you find that your bag can only hold so much color, then only work on maybe 2 cookies at one time. It's just easier if you can work on more than 1 cookie at a time, because then you don't have to have any waiting time in between. And depending on how smooth and accurate you do your dress, you might choose not to put as much decoration as I did, but I looked at several of Marie Antoinette drawings of dresses, plus I went and looked at the movie with Kristen Dunst to get an idea of what that time era the fashion was. And there was quite a bit of frills and flounces with the dresses, so I went ahead and decided to go as crazy as I could with the decorating and really make it look like it was from that era. But if you choose to do very little, then be a little bit more accurate with how you top coat this part. You're going to leave it more plain than I am. I'm doing this just so I can have definition of where I'm going. And because obviously the whole cookie isn't going to have intricate piping on it. When I first started with the cookie, I must admit at first I was a little bit intimidated. I wasn't sure where I was going to go, what direction I was going to take. But once you get going, it actually ended up being a lot of fun and pretty simple. Alright, when you get to this point, you're going to want to put it under a desk lamp so that, I don't know if you've ever noticed when you're working with top coating, sometimes it'll divot in areas, and you don't want that. So if you put it under a desk lamp for, a good, I would say 4 hours, it'll dry nice and evenly for you. So obviously can't use this cookie, it's pretty wet, so let me go get the dry cookie and we'll start there. Alright, I'm mixing up my silver highlighter for her headpiece. And I want it at a pretty thick consistency. I'm mixing it with Everclear so we don't damage the icing, because royal icing with water, it's a little too thick though. We very well could start melting it. If you don't like the idea of using alcohol, you can always use lemon extract. Works really well. I just piped a little bead on the top of her headpiece. You could turn this into a feather. But you'll find if you color your icing gray for silver or yellow for gold that it will pop when you go to paint it rather than look muted. You'll use less. So that's that for the silver. Now for her eyes, and I tried a couple of different things. Actually, I'm going to real quick just put a little bit of a mixture of flesh tone color with some champagne. I'm using the Sugar Flare powders just to give her face a little bit of a highlight. I don't want to go too crazy with it, but I want to give her cheeks just a little bit of pop. So we'll put just a little bit on here and here. Okay. For the eyes, you're going to want to work with a 5-0 brush. I'm just making sure I have all my brushes the right size here together. And you want to have some Q-tips ready in case your black goes a little bit crazy with you. Okay, so you're going to work with 2 5-0s and 1 2-0. The first thing you're going to want to do, and I'm working with, I found this professional grade black Pro Gel worked the best. But if you want to try using a food safe marker, go for it. This is what I found worked best for me. Because it's such a small little piece of an eye that the last thing you want to do is get too much color in there. So I'm just going to give her a tiny little bit of an eyelid. And I'm going to work this way on this eye so you can see it. And I'm almost side loading it so I have very little on my brush. And this way I'm also working against her hair so that I don't get black in her hair. And you want just a tiny bit, just a hint so that people know that she has an eye. Now on this one I would have turned it around if I wasn't showing it for the camera, but I want you to be able to see. So just a hint of an eyelid. I'm not even going to do the lower lid. And then I'm going to take a chestnut. This is made by Squires for the color of her eye. You can go with any color you wanted to. I wanted to do something that just wouldn't pop too much. I don't want to draw too much attention to her eyes Like I said, they're so small in there that I just want to give the illusion that we have eyes. And then this is up to you. If you want to go in and put a dot of black in there for the pupil, go ahead. Very small. And then you're going to want to highlight with just a little bit of white, because your eyes always have a little bit of highlighting going on. And you could use a powder or a liquid for that. And that's it. That's all it is for her face. Now if you want to make her lips or something pop, you could do that with a little bit of red. I want to keep her a little bit more muted. And that's how we did Marie Antoinette. So I thank you for joining me. And again, if you want to leave her completely top coated and add just a little bit of decoration, that would be great. If you want to actually go in and add a ton of piping, that would work as well. So I'll see you in the next video.